Homeschool, and today I'm going to give you a comparison between the Memoria Press Simply Classical 3 versus second grade. And so we're going to start with the basics. Simply Classical 3 is a 34-week program with an optional 8-week extension program, and it's intended for special needs students at a 7 to 8-year-old chronological or skill level. So that means they could be 7 to 8 years old by age or just by skill. And then the second grade program is, of course, intended for second graders. So that's about 7 to 8 years old and is a 34 weeks program. And it's, for students without special needs. That's the intention. But I wanted to compare these two because I think there's a lot of similarities and differences, and depending on what you prefer, you could totally use Simply Classical 3 for a student without special needs, in my opinion, and I wanted to show you both programs. Okay, so Simply Classical has a 4-day schedule with an optional 5th day. It's a completely optional 5th day that you don't have to do. It doesn't impact the rest of the program. But second grade has a 5-day schedule, so keep that in mind too. Okay, then I wanted to do a subject content comparison so we can see the differences in what is actually used and taught in the different programs. So Simply Classical 3 for Latin uses Prima Latina, but they only use the first 5 lessons and then they review those first 5 lessons. They also do not use the whole student book. The student book is included. However, they tell you actually not to use it. And in the back of the teacher guide, they give you copies of the 12 pages from the Prima Latina student book that you will need. And they say to save the student book for Simply Classical 4, so they'll have a fresh student book when they get there. But in second grade, they use the entire Prima Latina program, including the student workbook, and they actually also have a copybook, a Prima Latina copybook, which I'll talk about too. For grammar, in the Simply Classical 3, that's included in their literature in the More Storytime Treasures and in the Simply Classical Writing 2. I have a video of the Simply Classical Writing 2 that's going to be posted actually right before this video, and so you can see the grammar that's included in that. Now, in the second grade program, they have something called English Grammar Practice. This is brand new. I will also be doing a flip through of this, so keep an eye out for that. But it's a 2-day-a-week, just English Grammar Practice, like it says. But in second grade, they consider their main grammar program is actually Prima Latina. So their grammar instruction is going to come from that. Now, for phonics, Simply Classical 3 actually uses phonics workbooks. So it starts off the first 8 weeks with the first start reading E, which I've listed right here. However, they do say that and there's also 2 books, little readers that I'll show you later that they use in the first 8 weeks. However, they say if your student is beyond that, that's okay. You can skip the first start reading E, and they give you an alternate schedule where you start with the Core Skills Phonics 3. They use the Core Skills Phonics 3 throughout the entire Simply Classical 3 program. In the optional 8-week extension that I mentioned earlier, they use Core Skills Phonics 4. Now, in second grade, there is no separate phonics workbook. It is all included in the literature. And so you use, I have a video on the second grade literature. I'll link that too. I'll put a card up. But you use the classical phonics book and you use the phonics flashcard and all of that, but it's not really sequential or anything. It's just kind of whatever ties in with that chapter in that literature. So if your student needs some more phonics work, then, Simply Classical 3 might be a better choice. For reading, the Simply Classical 3 uses More Storytime Treasures, which is adapted from first grade. It's not the exact same thing as first grade, although it uses 4 of the 5 books in the More Storytime Treasures in first grade. So first grade uses Storytime Treasures and then More Storytime Treasures. So it's like the second half of first grade reading, but it takes out one of those books, but it adds Wagon Wheels and Prairie School, which Prairie School is the first second grade book, if that makes sense, but no guides are used, so no guides for Wagon Wheels or Prairie School. And then there's also those 2 little phonics readers that are used in the first 8 weeks if you so choose, which I'll show you on the next page. In second grade, they read Animal Folktales, Prairie School, The Courage of Sarah Noble, Little House in the Big Woods, and all the Beatrix Potter books. Plus they have a summer reading journal, Plus, there's literature guides for all of those. And the literature guides, again, is where that phonics is taught. So let me show you what this looks like. These two readers on the side, Sounds of Sea and On the Trail. These two books are little readers used at the very beginning in the first 8 weeks of Simply Classical 3. Then they go on to the More Storytime Treasures, and there's a student workbook. I will be doing a flip through of this as well. And then they go on to Wagon Wheels and Prairie School. Second grade, as you can see, here's all the books they use here. The very first one they read is Prairie School, and then they move on to Animal Folktales, and then The Courage of Sarah Noble, and then Little House in the Big Woods, and then Beatrix Potter. And so that's how that works. However, I believe that this literature is super easy to sub out if it's too easy or too hard. Okay, so then we get to math. So for Simply Classical 3, Rod and Staff Math 2 is used, but only units 1 to 3. But it includes living books and movement activities. Now, these movement activities are on the 5th day. That's optional, but if you wanted to do them, you could, of course, do them on a different day if you weren't doing 5 days. But the movement activities is some sort of hands-on activity that goes with math. Now, the second grade also uses Rod and Staff Math 2, but it includes units 1 to 5, and it includes enrichment. So these enrichment activities are in the back of the teacher guide, and it's different things, anything from talking about pyramids to just different things. I can show you that in another video. But so the second grade does not include living books like the Simply Classical 3 does, and so there's that difference in comparison there. Now for the copybook, Simply Classical 3 uses Copybook Cursive 3. It goes directly with the Bible. In fact, it's scheduled along with Bible. And the second grade uses Copybook Cursive Scriptures and Poems plus the Prima Latina copybook. So there's more, copy work in the second grade than there is in Simply Classical 3. The memory work in both is very similar. There's differences too, but it covers a lot of the same content. It's too much to go into in this short video, but I can, if you want, again, do a whole separate video on just the differences in the memory work in each. I'd be happy to do that. The composition in Simply Classical 3 is the Simply Classical Writing 2, Read Aloud, or Bible Edition. So that means you can choose either one. The Read Aloud goes with the history. The Bible Edition goes with the Bible. You get to choose. You don't do both. You just choose one. And again, I have a video of that. The composition in second grade, there's no separate composition program like there is in Simply Classical 3. In second grade, that's all included in the literature guides, and then in their composition and sketchbook, which they use with their enrichment. So in the enrichment program, they're asked to write a sentence and draw a picture of what they learned in that read aloud, but and then in the literature guide, they're instructed to write complete sentences and things like that. But there's not an actual composition program included in second grade, if that makes sense. For spelling, we've got in Simply Classical 3, they use Simply Classical Spelling 2, which has a focus on oral spelling, plus Core Skills Spelling 2. And in second grade, they use Traditional Spelling 2. I have a video of Traditional Spelling 2, so you can see that. I do not have Simply Classical Spelling 2, so I can't give a total overview of that. I'm just going by what is in the teacher guide. Okay, so for Bible, in Simply Classical 3, they use the Story Bible, and they use both the Old and the New Testament, and they use the Simply Classical copybook that I just mentioned, and that is 4 days a week. However, in second grade, they also use the Story Bible, but it's just the New Testament, and there's a Christian Studies enrichment book. I have a video on this. I'll put a card, and this is only 2 days a week. In art, they use the grades K to 2 art cards in Simply Classical 3, but only the grade 2 art cards in second grade. For geography, in Simply Classical 3, they learn states and capitals with a Dover sticker book plus some states and capitals flashcards, and they learn the order in which the states became part of the United States. They learn them in order. In second grade, there's no real geography included. And for cursive, they both use New American Cursive 2, but Simply Classical 3 has the added Thankfulness Journal that second grade does not have. But of course, you could throw that into second grade very easily if you wanted to. Okay, for history, this is the biggest difference, in my opinion, between these two programs. So the history and science and poetry and music and crafts and art. It's all included as part of their, enrichment. Well, in Simply Classical 3, it is American history with read-alouds, and those read-alouds are tied to the composition. Again, refer back to my Simply Classical 2 writing video. Plus, they have an 8-week edition with stories of great Americans for little Americans. So again, Simply Classical 3 is American history using read-alouds. Now in 2nd grade, it's random American history topics. It's not even every week, and they do use picture books and stories of great Americans for little Americans. But again, there's no sort of chronological schedule there. It's not even every week. So that's a huge difference right there between the two programs. Science in both is once a week with picture books. However, in 2nd grade, they also add Patterns of Nature, which is by Rod and Staff. So there's the additional workbook added. Poetry is not included in Simply Classical 3 that I can find, but in 2nd grade, they use a child's book of poems plus animals. Of course, be super easy to put those 2 books into Simply Classical 3 if you wanted to. For music, for Simply Classical 3, there's a playlist included. In 2nd grade, there's a playlist included, but there's also a music enrichment book which talks about the composer and kind of asks some questions. And then crafts are not included in Simply Classical 3, but they are included with the enrichment in 2nd grade. So for every week in 2nd grade, there is a craft to go along with the read-aloud book that week. Okay, I also mentioned over here that in 2nd grade, all enrichment activities have a theme for the week. For example, the theme might be apples, or it might be the jungle, or it might be rocks, or it might be earthquakes, or mammals, or whatever. But all of the enrichment kind of surrounds that theme. So it kind of reminds me of a 5 in a row style. So in 5 in a row, if you're familiar with that program, you'll have a read aloud and all of your different activities will be centered around that read aloud. That's exactly what grade 2 enrichment is like, but it's not necessarily in any sort of order. So you're skipping around a lot. I also said here that the 2nd grade enrichment is definitely more science heavy versus history heavy. So Simply Classical 3 enrichment is definitely history heavy. 2nd grade is science heavy. So just keep that in mind too. And that is it. So I hope that gives you a great idea of what the differences and similarities are between these 2 programs. If you have any questions, please let me know. Again, I'm going to put a card in for all these videos I mentioned, and I will be having more videos come out to show you these different things. And if there's anything in particular that I don't have that you want to see, please let me know, and I'll be happy to do that. Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful